Hello, this is Ray Scriber. I'm the State Director for the Louisiana Main Street Program. This webinar is an introduction to the Main Street approach to downtown and historic commercial district revitalization. Back in the middle part of the last century, our downtowns were the place to be. As you can see in this picture, people shopped and spent a lot of time in the downtowns of our small towns. At that time, about 90% of all the dollars that were earned in the community were spent in that community. And trade area was only about 15 miles, and that means that people shopped and lived in the community that they earned their money in. They didn't travel over more than a 15-mile radius and spend their money. People didn't easily drive from the small towns in our state to the larger commercial centers. They spent their money in the small towns, and downtowns were thriving. But then along came the Interstate Highway Act of 1956, and our world changed drastically. I don't know if Miss Blacktop and Miss Concrete, who are there cutting the ribbons on this interstate, knew the impact of the interstate highway system at that time, but it certainly has impacted our nation. And the way that it's impacted it is that we have become a nation that is centered on the automobile. Take a look at this image, and what do you see? Everything in this image is centered around an automobile. You see a shopping center with acres and acres of parking there. Lots of it is not used, but is there. Blacktopped over land space. You see what looks like acres and acres of cookie cutter developments for residences. But what do you see running right through the middle of this picture? A big highway. So everything in this image is centered around access to that highway. This is one of the results of what has happened because of the implementation of the interstate highway system. Today our trade area is more than 50 miles. People will easily drive from one community to another to shop, to spend money, to eat out at a restaurant, to go to events, and no longer do people necessarily spend the money in the community where they live and where they work and where they earn the money. As a result, we see a lot of big box shopping centers, strip shopping centers, and chain stores that are infiltrating our country. The thing about this is that any of these pictures could be anywhere in the United States. You could drop down into these scenes and not know where you are unless you already knew where you were. So as a result of this, many of our communities have lost their character and the things that have made them unique. This is the next iteration of where we're going with things. This is Perkins Row in Baton Rouge. What does this look like? A historic downtown. But when you go out there, you get a sense that it's created and that it's not authentic. It didn't spring up naturally and develop over a period of time. You get the sense that it was all built at the same time and that it's very planned out and very decided upon. You see that they really implemented some things to make this have the small town feel. You see Perkins Row Town Hall, which is actually the Cinemark movie theater, multiplex movie theater, across from the town square that has a fountain. It's a very nice space, but again, it does not have the same authenticity as our downtown areas do. The thing about this also is that you have to drive out for miles and fight traffic on Bluebonnet Boulevard to get to this center. So a lot of the characteristics of a downtown are lost by trying to get to this particular shopping center. This is what began to happen as a result of the interstate highways and the expansion and sprawl of our communities. This is an image of what happened in our downtown areas. People back in the mid part of the last century thought that the historic buildings at the time were ugly and they let them fall into disrepair. They felt that the way to compete with the shopping centers was to cover up these buildings and to make the downtown look new and modern and more competitive and have the same look as the new shopping centers that were springing up everywhere. So you'll see a lot of the historic buildings in the downtown areas have been allowed to deteriorate and then also are covered up with false panels of different types of materials that were not typically used in the original construction. Here's another example of that type of mentality from the middle part of the last century. This is a town in North Louisiana, and we'll see an after picture later on in the presentation. But in this particular town, the picture was taken from the courthouse square, which is in the middle of the downtown, and on all four sides of the downtown, the building owners covered the faces of their buildings with these metal slip covers, and to try to give the downtown area a look of a shopping center. And it did, and at that time it probably seemed to be attractive, but I don't think that we would today consider this to be an appealing place that we would want to shop, or something that's unique and has a lot of character. Here's another example of a downtown in Louisiana that fell victim to the ability to travel from town to town. This is an example of a town that was dirty. It didn't look good. There were weeds springing up across the downtown area. The buildings had been allowed to deteriorate. And it's really not a shopping location that you'd want to go to and spend much time in. We'll see an after picture of this particular downtown also, and see how much this has improved over the years. So the National Trust for Historic Preservation realized that this trend was taking place in our country, and developed what has become the National Main Street movement. Back in 1977, they picked 3 communities that ranged in size from about 5,000 to 38,000 people. They went into these communities and provided an analysis of each of the downtowns to look at its assets and its needs, its strengths, its weaknesses, the things that were vital to making this again become an economic driver for the community. Then by 1980, the National Trust assisted 6 other states, and in 1984, Louisiana joined the National Main Street Network, which means that we've been having a Main Street program in the state of Louisiana for more than 30 years now. This image shows the communities that are currently participating in the Main Street program across the state. We currently work with 31 small towns. Primarily, Main Street works with communities that have a population of 50,000 and less, and helps them with their revitalization efforts to revitalize their historic downtown areas. However, we also work with some urban districts in New Orleans that we began this work after Hurricane Katrina to help in the recovery efforts, and we currently work with 4 neighborhood commercial districts in the city of New Orleans. So in addition to the small town model that we have been working with for years and years, we now work with some neighborhood commercial districts in urban areas. So the Main Street approach is based on 4 points: design, organization, promotion, and economic restructuring. The Main Street approach is a trademarked approach, and it's a long-proven approach to downtown commercial district revitalization. It's a common sense strategy. It's a framework that's driven by strategy, and it guides community-based revitalization efforts. It harnesses the social and economic and physical and cultural assets that set apart a place, and ultimately leads to tangible outcomes that benefit the entire community. Here you'll see a diagram of how the Main Street approach works. It starts with creating a vision for success in the downtown district. This vision is rooted in really a solid understanding of the market realities of the district. It's informed by the broad community engagement. Main Street is very much a volunteer-driven program, and it is very important that the community becomes involved in the revitalization effort of its downtown. The essential step of soliciting input from all the stakeholders provides a foundation for outlining the community's identity, the expectations of the community for their downtown revitalization, and the ideals of that community. And it also helps to confirm the real and perceived perceptions, the needs and the opportunities. And it also, by engaging the stakeholders and all the volunteers, it also helps make sure that the vision for the downtown is a true reflection of the diversity of that community, and also helps to make sure it's a true reflection of the unique characteristics of that community. But a vision of success alone is not enough. Communities must work together to identify the key transformation strategies that will be put in place to bring about the change in the downtown historic district. As a result of these transformation strategies that cover all the programming for these transformation strategies covers all 4 points of the Main Street approach, and the result of this is some quantitative and qualitative outcomes. The quantitative output or outcome is the visual results and the actual revitalization of the downtown, but it's very important also to maintain a measuring process and measure the results that take place. Healthy Main Streets are built on a commitment that measures outcomes. The resources that are available for funding downtown revitalization programs are scarce, and the competition for these resources is fierce, so it's important that Main Streets must be able to demonstrate how they use the resources that are available to them, and their use of these resources translates into real change. New jobs are added to Main Street, new businesses open up, buildings are redeveloped, and there are numerous other metrics of success that we measure and have our communities report on. So again, the Main Street program is based on a 4-point approach. The 4 points are design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. Every Main Street program in the state of Louisiana and every Main Street program in the country has a board of directors and a paid professional Main Street director. The board of directors is responsible for programming and developing the transformation strategies that cross the 4 points, and together with the Main Street director and the volunteers, they implement these strategies to get the outcomes that we see in a historic downtown area. I'm going to go through each of the 4 points and give some of the basics of what that point covers. The first point, and probably the most important point, is economic vitality. The end result of a Main Street program is to bring economic development to a community, and especially in the downtown area or the neighborhood commercial district. Economic vitality point works to strengthen existing businesses. It's important that the businesses that are in place are strong businesses. They've stuck in the downtown area through thick and thin, many of them. They've been in the same location for years and years, and it's important not to forget them and to help them have stronger business practices and a stronger business environment. But in addition to supporting the existing businesses, it's also important to identify new business opportunities. The Main Street programs look at the appropriate business mix for the downtown. They look at areas that are not served in the community as a whole, and look for those business opportunities and present them to the appropriate business people, and then encourage them to meet those business opportunities by locating in the downtown areas. This point also looks at finding new uses for vacant buildings. Many of our small towns in the state of Louisiana at one time had a big department store or other large building that was a vibrant business at one time, but then as times changed, that business was no longer able to sustain and left a building there that's big. So this will never ever again probably be a big department store for a downtown area. So what do you do with that vacant building? How do you repurpose the building so that it's used in a way that is very appropriate for today's business environment and can also be a sustainable business? Economic vitality is about intensifying the uses of buildings. What that means is they're going back to the original model from history, where many times businesses were located on the ground floor. Retail establishments and restaurants and other businesses were on the ground floor, and the upper floors were used for residential purposes. Many of our buildings in downtowns today are vacant on the upper floors, and that gives a lot of opportunity for residential establishments to be developed in those areas. And it's a big desire these days for living downtown. And so also part of economic vitality is in creating a supportive business environment throughout the community that includes the city government, making sure that they do the things that are important for helping businesses thrive and survive in their community. Here's an example of a property in Natchitoches, Louisiana. At the time this picture was taken, it was not very intensely used. As you see, there's no roof on the building. Many of the interior floors have rotted out and no longer exist, and there's no longer walls in a big portion of this building. But a developer bought the property and decided that it could become a vibrant building again. If you're familiar with Natchitoches, this is the old Natchitoches Hotel located on the corner of Front Street and Church Street, right when you come across the bridge into the historic downtown area. So it was a very important location in the city of Natchitoches, and for many, many years was an eyesore. But then the developer bought it, and as you see here, made a beautiful building out of it again. There's retail and other establishments on the ground floor of this property, and then residential spaces are up above on the upper floors, and this is a very successful redevelopment. People want to live in this building. They want to live in downtown Natchitoches, and the residential spaces are able to attract the very high rental rates or property ownership rates. So it's a very successful example of how a building can be more intensely used and repurposed for new uses in today's environment. Here's an example of someone that lives in a downtown area in one of our communities. Upper floor redevelopment is not for everybody. Everybody doesn't want to live in a building downtown, but in particular, senior citizens or retired people who no longer want to have a big yard to maintain. They find that downtown living is very appealing to them. Also, young adults, young couples, young single adults many times like to live in spaces in downtown areas. Probably families with kids aren't as prone to living in downtown areas because there's no yards, but there's certainly an appealing market for a lot of different types of people for living in downtown areas. The second point that we want to cover today is the design point. In the design area, this point covers many different areas about the physical elements of a downtown. You want to enhance all of the physical elements of the downtown, not just building improvements, but also public spaces, sidewalks, the cleanliness of the downtown, how well a downtown space is lit, and the security environment, the environment of security that it has in the downtown area. All of these areas are addressed for the design aspect of the Main Street approach. It's important that a downtown area capitalizes on its unique assets and its built environment and also in the other maybe natural elements that might be present in the downtown area. So the design point will help people capitalize on these unique assets and help provide training to the Main Street Board so that they know how to provide this. Also, architectural assistance is an important part of this. Through our office here in the state government, we have a design consultant on our staff who can provide architectural assistance. We can provide renderings of a building, what a building can look like if it's restored properly. Many times we find that people own a historic building and know that they want to restore it. They know they want to do the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is. So we can help with that. Our design consultant can meet with property owners and give them advice and suggestions and design concepts for restoring the historic properties. Here's an example of a block in downtown DeRidder. At the time this picture was taken, it was kind of forgotten about in a lot of ways. You can see that the buildings are empty. To the left of the building, on the left, the Hinky Dinky building, there is a concrete slab where another building used to be. Then there is a vacant lot to the left of that concrete slab, and then the one-way highway, U.S. highway that goes through downtown DeRidder is on the other side of that vacant lot. The rest of the downtown's on the other side of the highway, so this block was kind of set apart and is, as you see, forgotten about. We met with the mayor of DeRidder, and he said that he felt like the little building on the right would make a good ice cream parlor, and I agreed with him. I said, yeah, I think that would be a good ice cream parlor. So I got our design consultant to provide a rendering for what this building could look like as an ice cream parlor. And I asked him to go ahead and do a rendering for that entire block. And this is the rendering that he came up with. You can see how that block of buildings could be transformed into something that would be very desirable, a place that people would want to have their businesses. He showed in the upper image, he showed how a courtyard could be set up on the side of the little building, and then also how the big warehouse buildings in the back of the commercial buildings could be used and transformed into some type of office space or other type of use, and so that those buildings could be put back into commerce also. Many times an image like this can be used by the Main Street director or the mayor of a city to show to potential property owners or to developers to show what these buildings could look like if they were restored, and also to attract businesses into those buildings. Here's another example of a rendering that was done by our design staff. This is a building in downtown Plaquemine. When before the current property owner bought this building, the building had served as an auto parts store. So it was a big empty space with no walls inside, which served as a perfect opportunity for a developer to come in and make an event space in this building. He realized that there was a need for an event space in Plaquemine, and the building seemed to be perfect for him. Our designer met with him, provided the rendering that you see there on the top. They followed the design guidelines and suggestions pretty closely, and you see the bottom image is what the building looks like today. So from an auto parts store to an event space that's a really beautiful asset for downtown Plaquemine, this is a good success story for design and adaptive reuse of historic buildings. Here's another building in downtown Abbeville. It's pretty ugly. It had served as a bar, and it was pretty ugly when it was a bar. Then it was vacant for a while, and it stayed in this shape. Not a very attractive enhancement for downtown Abbeville. Again, a new property owner purchased the building. We worked with the Main Street director and this new property owner to provide a rendering. This is the rendering that we provided, and then this is the final outcome for the property. You can see they followed our suggestions closely and made a vast improvement on this building. And the building reopened as a day spa in downtown Abbeville and attracted people into downtown and brought some street traffic into downtown Abbeville. Here's an example of the metal slip covers that we talked about earlier, that were installed in the 1950s and 60s to make the buildings look modern and contemporary at the time. This is an example in Ruston. These metal slip covers were used pretty extensively across the country, and now are in some areas becoming historic in their own right, only if they are examples of high design from the 1950s and 60s. So we're working with property owners to try to get these removed as much as possible. But here's an example of a before picture in Ruston, and then how the building owner took those metal panels off. They went back and did research, found historic photographs of the building. This particular historic photograph is from about 1949, and then they worked to restore the building as closely as possible to that same look after the metal panels were taken off. One of the things about these metal panels is that they really protected the fronts of the buildings, and they were most times installed in such a way that the impact to the building was minimal. They didn't do a lot of damage to the building. They're many times just bolted on in certain spots. They're easy to remove, and the resulting damage to the buildings is not very extensive at all. We saw this image earlier in downtown Hammond. As I said, it was a building that was covered up. We have, within the Louisiana Main Street program, we have a facade grant program. We call it redevelopment incentive grants, which actually can be used to restore interior portions of buildings as well as exterior portions of buildings to their historic look. This is the after picture of that. This building received one of our facade grants way back when we first started up the program, and you can see that it had a beautiful end result for the restoring that property back to its historic character. We also saw this town before. This is Bastrop. We talked about it. It was the picture taken from the courthouse square, where all the buildings around the square on all four sides of the square had these metal slip covers put over their buildings to cover them up and make them competitive back in the 50s and 60s. This is an example of what Bastrop looks like today. The slip covers have been removed, awnings have been placed back on the fronts of the buildings, and it's a vast improvement for downtown Bastrop. At the same time this work was being done, the parish police jury was restoring the courthouse. Not only did they restore the courthouse itself, but they also did some improved and historic looking lighting for the downtown square. They restored the sidewalks and rebuilt them. They added some decorative railings. So all of this worked together in conjunction to really revitalize the look of downtown and really bring in new businesses into the downtown area. Since that time, the Main Street program in Bastrop has gone on to work with a developer to help restore the historic Bastrop High School, and it's now been restored and is open as residential spaces for senior citizens. Many of the people went to school in the building and now have ended up living in the school, and it's a beautiful result and a good example of how a Main Street organization can work in the areas surrounding the downtown area also to help improve the whole area. The Bastrop High School is located a couple blocks away from the downtown area, but they felt that it was important to get that restored, not only to save the historic high school, but also to improve the entry ways into the downtown area and to serve as an asset for the entire city of Bastrop. We saw this image also, the dirty, kind of forlorn looking rundown area of downtown. This actually is in downtown New Iberia, and this is how it looked in 1996. And now how it looks today. You see a vast improvement in downtown New Iberia. New Iberia is one of two Great American Main Street Award-winning communities in the state of Louisiana. Natchitoches is the other. But you see that vast improvements were made in downtown New Iberia. One of the ways that this came about was that the Main Street Board, at the time that they started working, they felt like that if balconies could be added back to the fronts of the historic buildings as appropriate where they were before, that would aid in the development of upper-level residential spaces. The city had an ordinance on the books that prevented anything from being constructed over the sidewalks, so people couldn't put balconies on their buildings. The Main Street Board went to the City Council and asked for that ordinance to be removed and explained why, that they felt like that the residential spaces would develop if that ordinance was removed. The City Council obliged and removed the ordinance. People put balconies back on their historic buildings where there was photographic evidence that those balconies had originally existed on the buildings, and that's exactly what happened. People developed the spaces, and there's a lot of very nice residential spaces in the upper floors in downtown New Iberia today, and people live in downtown New Iberia. The third point of the four-point approach is organization. Main Street programs can be organized either as standalone nonprofit organizations that are housed, they can be standalones, or they can be housed in an existing community development entity as a nonprofit. But also, many of our programs in Louisiana are housed in municipal government. The Main Street director is a city employee, and reports to the city council and to the mayor, and the Main Street program is a program of the municipal government. There's pluses and minuses to both organizational structures. Across the country and other parts of the country, many of the Main Street programs are standalone nonprofits, but in Louisiana, we're more heavily weighted in the fact that the programs are housed in municipal government. If a community is interested in starting up a Main Street program, we will visit with them and help them decide which model works best for that particular community, and then support them in whatever model they feel works best. The organization point is responsible for developing coalitions and partnerships with other community development organizations within the community, and other organizations in general. Main Street programs can't do downtown revitalization alone. It's a citywide effort, and partnerships are very important with other organizations. Also, there's an important responsibility to manage volunteers and staff, especially if an organization is a nonprofit organization. Is responsible for managing the staff. The board of directors has to do that. The board of directors is also responsible for fundraising to help fund that standalone nonprofit and to pay the director's salary. The organization point is also responsible for public relations and outreach to talk about the good things that the Main Street organization is doing, and then outreach to the community to help educate them on the importance of downtown and revitalization, and also to talk about the things that they're doing. Then the organization point also manages the finances and operation of the organization, more especially if it is a standalone nonprofit. Here's an example of volunteers at work in Bastrop again. Many times there are things that a city government cannot do due to financial restrictions or manpower restrictions, and probably shouldn't be expected to do. A lot of these things need to be taken on by volunteers, so this is where a Main Street program can serve as an important partner with the city government. For example, here in Bastrop, the trees were planted, some flowers were planted around the trees. Well, the city government can't be relied on and shouldn't be relied on to water those plants and make sure that they're living, so that that falls to the roles of volunteers. And here's an example of how these volunteers are working together to make sure these are planted and that they stay alive, and that the plants look good in downtown Bastrop. Here's another example of a fundraising event in Clinton. Mad Hatters there in Clinton are raising money for their Main Street program. Clinton is a small town, one of our smallest towns in the state Main Street program, but they've had a successful Main Street program for years. They are not part of city government. They are a nonprofit organization, so they're responsible for raising all their funds, and they've been a success in doing that through the years. The fourth point of the four-point approach is promotion. This is promoting the downtown so that everyone understands that the downtown is the center of the community and the hub of the economic activity in that community. This involves several different things such as image promotion, retail promotion, and special events. It's important to highlight the character of a community and the culture of a community. Here's an example of how Opelousas is promoting itself. They had a citywide branding campaign developed for them. They promote themselves as the Zydeco capital of the world, but most importantly, they talk about the food heritage that they have and the spices and the seasoning that are produced there in Opelousas, and how that all works together as a cultural theme. So Main Street was a part of that branding process. The city of Opelousas brands itself as perfectly seasoned, bringing all these elements together, and Main Street seized upon that and has developed the slogan of adding flavor downtown. So they focus on their cultural heritage and how it works with all the different aspects of the city of Opelousas. It's also important to promote the architectural heritage of a downtown area and celebrate that. Here's an example of Columbia, another very small town that has a successful Main Street program. I think the population of Columbia is about 750 people, so they're able to maintain a Main Street program even in a town that small. The Shepis Museum or the Shepis Building is a very important architectural treasure in downtown Columbia, and they celebrate that. One of the things that they did early on was to have an art gallery put into this building, and the lower picture there shows an example of an art opening when they had some artwork that was done by a Mr. Grayson, who was an ancestor of Kix Brooks, who was a part of the country music duo Brooks and Dunn. So Kix Brooks came to Columbia to help kick off this art exhibit from one of his ancestors. It drew a crowd into downtown Columbia on a day when particularly there might not be a lot of people in downtown Columbia, and it was a very successful event and very helpful in bringing in people into downtown. Cooperative advertising is another way that promotions can work to strengthen the downtown. Here's an example in New Roads. They have a downtown sidewalk sale where all the merchants work together to promote this and advertise that this event is going to be taking place in New Roads. They put sale merchandise out on the sidewalks. One of the things that they found, though, is that people come because they know the sidewalk sale is going to be taking place. They browse the things that are out on the sidewalk, but then they come into the store and look for other things and maybe end up purchasing some of the things that are not necessarily on sale. So it's important that you don't always have sale events to get people into the downtown because we want our merchants to be successful. It's important to do other things to attract people into the downtown other than just having a sale event. We want them to be able to sell their merchandise at full price and make the profit that's appropriate to that. So Main Street programs will work to plan big festivals and events. Here's an example in Winsboro of the Franklin Parish Catfish Festival that draws in thousands and thousands of people into downtown Winsboro on the first weekend in April. Here's another example of Fall Festival in Denham Springs where you can see both of these. They close off the Main Street area for the commercial district in the community, and they set up booths and people are able to shop and eat and do fun things in the downtown areas on these festival days. So Louisiana Main Street's been a success in Louisiana since 1984. Since that time in the downtown areas and in commercial districts that we work with, approximately 3,000 new businesses have been started, 12,000 new jobs have been created, over $348 million in private investment has been placed into the downtown districts and people restoring their buildings and fixing up their buildings. In addition to that, $231 million of public investment has been put into the districts through city governments, parish governments, and state government also. We're totally state funded in the Louisiana Main Street program, so we rely on state general fund dollars. Our return on investment from the budget that we had in 2014-15, for every dollar that Main Street or that the state invested in the Main Street program, the return on investment was $58. So for every dollar invested of your tax funds, the return was $58, which is a pretty good return on investment for state general fund dollars and state tax dollars. Why are our downtowns important? Well, our downtown's a symbol of community economic health, the quality of life, the vibrancy of the community, and the interest that people have in their community. Also, it helps to show the community history. It really is the thing that makes our communities unique and different one from another. If you have been in a downtown area, there are things there that make it recognizable, so that if you were dropped down into that downtown area without any identity of where you were, you could pretty much figure it out by looking at the buildings if you'd been there before. Vital downtowns retains and create jobs. That means a stronger tax base for the municipal government. Downtowns are good incubators for new small businesses. A lot of times the rental rates in downtown areas are lower than they are in the strip shopping centers out on the highway or out by the interstate. So new businesses can open up in the downtown areas, and their overhead cost are less many times than they would be out in the other areas. So it's a good incentive for new small businesses. They like the downtown once they open up there, and most times will end up staying in the downtown area. Vital downtown reduces sprawl. All the infrastructure is already in place for your downtown areas. The streets, the sidewalks, the sewer lines, the water lines, the utilities are all in place, so the community doesn't have to invest a lot of money for new businesses to come into a downtown area. Property values are protected not only for the downtown areas but also for the surrounding residential neighborhoods. It's been shown across the country that vibrant downtowns, the property values are protected and many times increase as a result of having activity and lots of good businesses in your downtown area. Also, downtown districts become tourist attractions. People don't come to your community to see the Walmart store out on the highway. They come to see your downtown area and to see what makes it unique and makes it a special place. And so that's one of the things that people come to see and that people want to spend time in your downtown district. So that's an overview of the Main Street 4-point approach. Main Street's economic development that works. It's been shown to work in the state of Louisiana. It's been shown to work across the country, and it can be shown to work in many other communities. If you or your community is interested in finding out more about the Main Street approach to downtown revitalization, please feel free to reach out to me. You see my contact information there, my email address, and my telephone number. We'll be happy to come to your community and meet with you, visit with interested people, and see if there's a way that we might work together to help revitalize your historic downtown area. Thank you for your time. And